Hey there, Eli coming at you again from OSA Coventry, and today I wanted to showcase a few of my favorite fish that came in on our latest saltwater shipment. Today I'm not so much going to go over every exact thing that we got in because it was a smaller shipment, but I did want to showcase some of my favorites from this smaller shipment. And so without further ado, I'd like to get into my top 5 from this latest shipment. Number 5 on my list is the golden Midas Spenny. This is a really interesting fish, especially for a smaller or medium-sized reef tank. Something that's very peaceful, and as much as it's not necessarily a utilitarian fish, it's a really fun presence in the aquarium. I've got one behind me here. It's hard to beat that really bright gold color that this guy has and that fun swimming pattern that these guys express. They are usually quite an active fish if they are housed in a peaceful enough aquarium, and they get a max size of about 5, maybe 6 inches, so anything in that 40-gallon plus range is usually appropriate for this guy. Unlike a lot of your other blennies, they're not an algae grazer, so most of the time they're really just going to be eating frozen foods. They can be trained on pellets as well if you're feeding a high-quality pelleted food, but these are really interesting, fun, and personable fish to add to the aquarium. If they're not out and about cruising along, as you see this guy here, they usually pick one spot in the rocks and they face outward, and they often will start to recognize you and greet you at the front glass when you do have one in the aquarium for long enough. Definitely a really fun, personable fish for a peaceful aquarium. Number 4 on my list is the Flameback Angelfish. This is a pygmy species of angel from the genus Centripede, so it is closely related to things like coral beauties and cherub angels. What I like about this fella is that he maxes out at about 2.5, maybe 3 inches, so they're very appropriate for a smaller aquarium. This is a reef safe with caution angelfish. As with a lot of the others from that genus Centripede, generally they are going to be reef safe, but every once in a while you find one that will nip at certain coral polyps, whether those be fleshy corals like acans and lobos, or smaller zoanthids and things of that nature. On occasion, you will run into a flameback angelfish that will pick at corals, so always worth being cautious of when you add them to the tank. Generally though, these are going to be one of the most reef safe options for an aquarium with corals, and with that max size being so small, they're really appropriate for some of your smaller saltwater aquariums, and they are something that can be mixed with some of your larger species of angels, and often not seen as a threat if you did decide to put this with a larger species in your home aquarium. As with most of your angels, these are going to graze at the rocks throughout the day. They will eat sponges, they will eat algae, so offering them a really good varied diet is important to making sure that they maintain health long term. Number 3 on my top 5 list for this week are the spotted Yellowy coal tang. These are a little bit different than the yellow eye coals that a lot of people were familiar with in the hobby a few years back. These are also known as a square tail bristletooth. They're one of my personal favorite species of bristletooth tang. They stay a little bit smaller than a lot of your others, so they are very similar in max size to its mini tang. Therefore, they're really appropriate for some of your smaller aquariums if you really were dead set on having a tang. Anything in the probably 50, 75 gallon range, as long as you've got ample swimming room, should be appropriate for one of these, as they only max out between around 5, maybe 6 inches max, and they're a very slow grower at that. As a bristletooth tang, they are a very good utilitarian fish. They are always grazing at the rockwork, always grazing at the glass. So they're going to help you out in between maintenance to keep algae off the rocks and your glass. Offering an appropriate diet for these fish is also quite important to making sure that they are a little bit more timid in your tank. Keeping them well fed with algae-based diets, things like nori, spirulina mysis, spirulina brine, and other things that offer that algae in the diet are going to be important in making sure that his health is maintained and making sure that it's a little more peaceful with some of your tank mates. But as a tang, they do get a little bit more territorial than some of your other fish, and it's always worth keeping that in mind if you do plan to add one. Number 2 on my list today is this beautiful Moyer's wrasse that's beside me here. This is a species of Leopard Rass, and for those of you who know me, you know I'm a sucker for Leopard Rasses. They are a very peaceful species of wrasse, something that really prefers a very laid-back aquarium. They can be quite shy. This is one species that I have at my home aquarium that after adding him to my tank, it was almost an entire month before I saw him during the daylight hours. However, if you are able to find a quite solid specimen, and this guy seems to be one himself, one that eats frozen right away and seems to be a little more out and about already, they are a very rewarding fish to keep. Leopard wrasses definitely do prefer a well-aged aquarium, something that's got a good amount of copepods, amphipods, and things that they can graze at throughout the day. and they prefer being with more timid species in your aquarium, as they are quite shy, like I just mentioned. Making sure to offer feedings more than once a day is usually most appropriate to keep these guys fat and happy, but they are an interesting wrasse, something that I don't see very often, and I think that coloration is something that's quite unique, and it's just an interesting fish to add to a more peaceful reef tank setting. Last but not least, I do have another species of wrasse to showcase. I have a beautiful blue throat fairy wrasse behind me here. Fairy wrasses are a really interesting addition for a lot of your, again, mostly peaceful reef tank centered aquariums, but this is a really interesting fish. This is one that we don't come across terribly often. I think that really bright red color in contrast with the deep blue throat and the white belly is a really cool contrast to see in a fish. This is a fish that is quite active throughout the day. These guys max out at about maybe 4 or 5 inches. They are a little bit larger than some of your other species of fairy wrasse, and they tend to be a little more on the rambunctious side. They are a little more outgoing than some of your other fairy wrasses tend to be. So for that reason, they are an appropriate aquarium fish. They're something that you will see most often throughout the day. And that bright color definitely adds some pop to your aquarium. It's hard to get colors that bright and vibrant in other species of fish. So for that reason, I think this is a really interesting, outstanding fish for your aquarium. As most of your other fairy wrasses, this guy will be a little more active throughout the day, and they should take quite well to feeding various frozen foods, things like mysis, brine shrimp. Even some of your spirulina-based frozen foods would be a good option, but a lot of these fishes will also take to pellet foods as well if you do desire to get them onto a more formulated diet. As always, thank you all for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed this little spotlight from our latest fish shipment. If you guys are looking for anything new for your fresh or saltwater aquarium, we did get some small shipments in this past week. Feel free to check us out this weekend to see what we have to offer. As always, thank you all for watching. Feel free to leave comments, questions, suggestions in the comment section below, and keep it fishy.